Kia ora whānau. This presentation is of a species that is very dear and close to my heart, the morepork, or ruru, and how it fits into our unique biodiversity. This iconic and mysterious raptor has been the centerpiece of a lot of Māori mythology and folklore, often referred to as kaitiaki, or guardians of the spirit world. Anyone who has slept in our forest overnight has more than likely heard its hauntingly solemn and ominous cry. I hope you find this presentation informative and interesting, and I hope I can represent this manua tahua with due justice. The ruru is Aotearoa's only endemic extant owl species, with the laughing owl being the only other native owl, which was declared extinct in 1914. It is one of very few birds of prey in New Zealand, along with the kareria, New Zealand falcon, and kahu, New Zealand harrier hawk, being the only endemic examples remaining. Birds of prey, or raptors, are extremely important to the ecosystem in which they reside, and are crucial indicators as to how healthy the ecosystem is because they depend on a healthy, diverse ecosystem for survival. They play an important ecological role in maintaining the environmental health of their natural habitat by removing old, sick, and weak animals from prey populations, and also helping to keep prey species under control. Also, by controlling the size of prey populations, raptors help slow down the spread of disease. They do this by removing carrion from the environment as well. It is extremely important to protect the morepork as well as our other raptors, as they are the only animals in New Zealand that help to reduce numbers of pests such as rats and mice. They are the only manu that are fighting back. Ruru make their nests and raise their young in holes in trees or in the fronds of fern trees. This makes them vulnerable to predators like wildcats, stoats, and possums because they can't escape. Like other birds of prey, moreporks regurgitate pellets of indigestible material such as bones, fur, and the exoskeletons of insects, and their diet can be accurately analysed by examining these pellets. Dock ornithologists use this method to study the diet of moreporks on one of the hen and chicken islands off Whangarei in conjunction with the Kiore Pacific Rat Eradication Project. It was reported that about 95% of morepork pellets contained traces of Kiore before poisoning took place, indicating that they were obviously an important food item. There is now no concern about the welfare of the birds since the rats have been eradicated from the area, because moreporks readily adjust their diets to whatever prey is most abundant. The removal of Kiore led to great increases in the number of seeds germinating on the islands, which in turn led to insect populations becoming much more plentiful. This is an extremely obvious indicator of just how important these magnificent little raptors are in our ecosystems. Small birds such as korimako, piwakawaka, and tohu recognize ruru as predators, and if they discover one, will form a mob and shoo it away. After suffering harassment for a while, the morepork usually withdraws to a more secluded spot. Moreporks are highly aggressive towards possums, which approach their nests, and where possum numbers are high, moreporks are forced to resort to nesting in holes that are so small that a possum can't squeeze in. Therefore, areas with high morepork numbers indicate low possum numbers, and vice versa. The taxonomical classification of the morepork goes as follows. It is a part of the Aves class, meaning it's a bird, the Strigiformes order, the Strigidae family, the Cerninae subfamily. It is of the genus Neonox, named after Neonox Hodgson in 1837, and the species in particular is Neonox novazelandii. The Neonox genus comprises about 36 species of owls found in Asia and Australasia. Many species are known as hawk owls or booboks. English naturalist John Latham wrote of the New Zealand owl in his 1782 work, A General Synopsis of Birds, but did not give it a binomial name. German naturalist Johann Friedrich Gmelin described the morepork in 1788. Morepork has been designated the official name by the International Ornithological Committee. Both Gerloff, Foucault, Mies, and Ernst Mayr regarded the taxonomy of the boobook owl as extremely challenging, the latter remarking in 1943 that it was one of the most difficult problems I have ever encountered. In his 1968 book Night Watchman of the Bush and Plain, Australian naturalist David Flea observed that the boobooks from Tasmania more closely resembled those of New Zealand than those from mainland Australia, though he followed Mies in treating them as a single species. Janet Norman and colleagues tested the cytochrome B DNA of 3 subspecies, as well as the powerful and rufous owls, to ascertain whether the closest relative was used in breeding with the last surviving female of the Norfolk boobook. They discovered that although the Norfolk boobook was similar in plumage to the Tasmanian boobook, it was genetically much closer to the New Zealand subspecies. In fact, the two were so close genetically that they considered whether the Norfolk boobook should be recognised as a separate taxon at all, although they conceded the two were easily distinguishable in appearance, so maintained the 3 as subspecies. The Tasmanian boobook only diverged by 2.7% from the other two, while the powerful and rufous owls diverged by 4.4% from each other. Leading from this, the Australian boobook was split from the Tasmanian boobook and Morepork in Volume 5 of the Handbook of the Birds of the World. However, several authors, including Les Christidis and Walter Bowles, contested that the data had been misinterpreted from the Norman study, which had not sampled any Australian mainland boobooks at all. They treated the 3 taxa, southern Tasmanian boobooks and moreporks, as a single species. Examining both morphological and genetic characters, Michael Wink and colleagues concluded that the Australian boobook was distinct from the morepork, as was the Tasmanian boobook, which would be raised to species status as Nenox leucopsis. The Norfolk Island boobook declined to near extinction in the 1980s, with only a single female remaining. The New Zealand morepork, considered to be the closest relative, was selected as a stud, and 2 males were dispatched in 1987. Paul Stevenson, a wildlife officer on the island, says that one of these individuals was never seen again, but after a couple of years, the remaining male and the remaining female produced 2 chicks, and then a couple more the next year. The progeny have bred successfully, and Norfolk Island populations are on the rise. Under consideration is the possibility of moving some of the birds to Lord Howe Island, where the indigenous boobook there became extinct. Moreporks traditionally fed on large invertebrates such as the weta, moths, and spiders. However, since the arrival of small land mammals, they have adapted to hunt and feed on mice and rats. Although primarily inhabiting native bush, moreporks have also adapted to live in pine forests, an open country where there are scattered trees for shelter and nesting, and even in suburban parks. They are one of few native bird species that have adapted to human colonization. Being a predatory bird, the ruru didn't evolve to a flightless life on the forest floor like many other New Zealand birds did during 18 million years of isolation from predators. Moreporks create a mental map of the topography of an area, enabling them to become expert navigators. It makes good sense for a nocturnal hunter to get to know a single territory very well. The ruru, like all owls, have evolved to have extraordinary eyesight, which has adapted them for a predatory nightlife. The morepork evolved to hunt at night to avoid being preyed on by other large raptors, such as the now extinct Haast eagle, and also to minimize competition for food as well. Super silent flight is another unique adaptation. This is owed to the fact that they have soft fringes on the edges of their flight feathers and a velvet-like covering on their wing surfaces. This enables them to swoop upon prey completely silently, at the cost of reducing speed slightly. Compared with many other birds, the wing area of moreporks, like all owls, is also large with respect to body weight, which enables them to fly effortlessly and silently. Surprising prey isn't the only reason these clever birds adapted to fly silently. All birds have acute hearing, and in moreporks and all owls this sense is particularly well developed. Observers have reported that moreporks have a higher success rate when hunting in dry conditions, when leaves rustle, than when the ground is damp and sound is muffled. Facial feathers and skull bones are arranged to ensure optimal funneling of sound to their large ear openings. This clearly indicates that they heavily depend on sound. Another reason for this stealthy flight mode adaptation is to maximize the bird's hearing during flight. It's not an option for them to stop moving and breathing when listening intently to a faint sound while in flight. The wide, flattened heads of the morepork allow both eyes and ears to be placed as far forward and far apart as possible. For the eyes, this produces overlapping visual fields that allow true binocular vision and fine depth perception, something of a rarity in birds. It is suspected, though not proven, that moreporks are able to see infrared light. Experts used infrared beams to set up so that a morepork breaking a beam triggers the camera shutter. Moreporks often seem to deliberately avoid the beams, which are invisible to our eyes. They then began taking time-lapse video shots of morepork nests, using infrared light to provide illumination. On those nights, the morepork delay the onset of their normal nocturnal activities by half an hour or more. Being able to detect infrared could help the ruru to locate warm-blooded prey, since infrared light is given off by warm objects. And there you have it. I hope I have kindled some love for my favourite bird and you have all learned something from this presentation. Ninox novus zelandii is one of very few birds of prey unique to New Zealand's biodiversity, and one of two owls separated and isolated when New Zealandia split from Gondwanaland 80 million years ago. It plays an extremely important role as an avian predator in our ecosystems. It is a hardy species, having made many adaptations to life and survival influenced by Aotearoa's specific biotic and abiotic conditions. It has even adapted to human colonization and introduction of small land mammals. The conservation status of ruru is of at least concern as the population is stable. However, they need to be protected like all of our unique manu with utmost importance, as the disappearance of our raptors will create a huge niche void in the balance of our ecosystems. Thank you for listening.